Hello, welcome to this recording on the top tips and how to avoid the common pitfalls for preparing for the CFA exam. My name is Simon Holhan. I am one of the CFA instructors here at Fitch Learning, and I've been preparing candidates for the CFA exam for many years across all three levels. Now, these are common pitfalls. This is an overview slide. We'll address them in more detail in a moment. This came about when we had a discussion amongst the CFA instructors, it was all of them around the world, and we asked them to collectively pool their knowledge and experience and to come up with these common pitfalls. There is an element of overlap in some of them, as you can imagine, but hopefully these will be useful in your preparation. The one thing I would say before we go into the detail is it's very rare we come across a candidate who fails CFA because they simply aren't bright enough, aren't intelligent enough. It's generally nothing to do with that. It's all about not having a plan, not having a strategy, not being focused, not being organized. And really, hopefully, once you've gone through these pitfalls, you'll see that theme and you hopefully see how we can help you avoid them. So let's start with the first one, the obvious one, the big elephant in the room. How many hours do you have to study for CFA? The recommended guidance from the CFA Institute is around 300 hours. Whether that is the amount that you need very much depends on your background. I know, speaking from personal experience, I managed to get away with a little bit less, but then that was made up at level 2 where I did more than 300 hours. So looking over all three levels, I think actually 300 hours is a pretty good average for the three levels. And that's a lot of time. It's a lot of time to fit in around what is invariably a busy week for you. All right? Most of us work long hours, and the idea of trying to find study time on top of that can be quite daunting. And this is where hopefully we can help you. With our online product, Fitch Learning Cognition, what we've done is we've broken down all the learning points. I guess the jargon or buzzword is atomized it. And we've taken all the learning points and we've condensed them into really small bite-sized nuggets of knowledge. The recordings are all very specific and all target on very specific concepts. And what that means is that you can maximize literally any spare time you have. If you just got 10 minutes where you're not doing something, you can watch a recording. In fact, you could probably watch 2 or 3 recordings in 10 minutes. Or you can watch a recording and then follow up with a few questions. So cognition will hopefully maximize your opportunity for learning by breaking it down to really useful small nuggets of information. Not having a study plan, I did mention that as an overview. A study plan is imperative. It's all about knowing what to do, when to do it, and of course keeping track of what you have done. Again, the online tool Cognition will help you do that. It will remember exactly where you left off when you log in again. It will remember your performance. It will not direct you to areas you've already done. It'll set you deadlines. You can manage that. So you can set your start and end date for your studying, and Cognition will work out intermediate deadlines for you to hit. If you fall behind, Cognition will be aware of that and it can adjust that study plan. So having a plan which enables you to cover the 300 hours in the time that works for you is absolutely essential. The syllabus is very wide. It's a lot of content is in that syllabus. You don't have to learn the whole syllabus. Ideally, yes, but no one has that time. And I think half of the battle is just relaxing and realizing that you don't have to be perfect. And you do not have to cover every single part of the syllabus. But that said, you have to cover a fair chunk of it. And the mistake that many of us make when we are revising is we over-focus on areas that we are comfortable with. We spend too long on areas that, quite frankly, we're probably okay with. And what we should be doing is addressing the areas which we find difficult. But that's quite difficult to do because we don't like finding out we've got something wrong. It's human nature. But it's inefficient of our time. So again, Fitch Learning Cognition will help monitor your performance. And it has a very clever algorithm built into it which will monitor your performance. It will monitor the questions. It will monitor which questions you've been given, Are they simple questions or are they difficult questions? It'll monitor your performance of those questions. And from that information, it can work out whether you are competent enough on a particular area to move on. And this will stop you using your valuable time on areas that you don't need to because you've already mastered that area. And what it will do, it will move you through the curriculum in probably the most efficient way, ensuring you cover as much of the curriculum as possible. Ethics. Ethics is a really important theme within the CFA exam. You should be aware of this. It's one of the few areas which actually is common for all 3 levels. And for all levels, the weighting is round about the 15% mark, which is a big weighting. You know, for level 1, it's the second biggest topic weighting. Right, so it's really important that you focus on ethics. Also, for many people, they don't realise this, but if you turn out to be what the CF Institute may deem borderline, so you're near the passing score, whichever that may be, but you're not quite there, then whether they decide you go through or not will purely be based on your ethics score. So it's really important if you are a borderline candidate. That said, you don't actually have to pass ethics. You could ace every other topic and get 0 for ethics. You'll be through. But that's quite a risky strategy. So I'd urge you to focus on ethics. 15%, remember, quite a big weighting. And if you are borderline, then it's crucial your ethics score is as high as possible. That then brings the issue as how to tackle ethics, because ethics is a pretty descriptive, quite narrative topic. It's not conceptual. There's no calculations. It's almost old-fashioned, I guess, rote learning. Again, as a team, we had a little chat about this, and we come up with probably 2 approaches that we have seen over the years. You can either do a small amount of studying, little and often, we often call it, or you can leave it towards the end and focus on your short-term memory. Personally, I used to prefer the first one. For me, I used to try and read one of the ethical standards that are in the Standards of Practice Handbook. So one standard or one rule. I read that in the morning on my commute into work, and I read another one in the afternoon in the way home. Each standard you can probably read in about 15 minutes. So that was it. I read 2 of the standards a day, and after about 3 weeks, I'd read the entire Standards of Practice Handbook. And I simply cycled round. So I kept going around, I kept reading. So by the time I hit the exam, I'd probably read the Standards of Practice 3, maybe 4 times. And that worked for me. Other colleagues of mine say, no, this is completely narrative, completely descriptive, no concept, so it works best for short-term memory. And so they suggest doing it at the end, put aside a couple of days and go through the standards and do lots of questions. So really, it's your choice. You probably know by now how you best learn. All I would say, though, is really, really make sure you don't neglect ethics. Very, very important aspect for passing CFA. Exam practice, particularly at level 1, where you're going to have lots of questions in your exam. Remember, you have 120 questions in the morning and 120 in the afternoon. That's a lot of questions, and therefore that gives the examiner scope to really ask questions on the 4 corners of the curriculum. So therefore you have to mirror that in your preparation. You have to master exam technique, and you have to have a wide range of questions to practice on. Right? So exam practice is very, very important. Obviously, cognition would include plenty of questions for you to work on, to work on your proficiency. But also we will help to prepare you for the actual real exam, which remember is a 6-hour exam. Okay, it's 2 3-hour papers, but it's a 6-hour exam. That's tiring. It's physically tiring. It's mentally tiring. So again, we will help you get through that. And I know many of our candidates will do attend our proctored mock, where we actually will replicate the real experience of having this 6-hour exam. Also, when you're doing long exams, I don't know about you, but I haven't done a long 3-hour paper since at university. It's a skill that we kind of lose. It's the ability to recall loads of information rapidly. So again, we can help you there. We have some, for example, mind maps, So those of you who are a visual learner, the mind maps can help you prompt your memory into the key points. Right? But certainly trying to build up to this big 6-hour exam is an important aspect of your preparation. Pacing your study. Yeah, so in a way, this is a bit like preparing for some kind of sport event. Maybe if you want to run a marathon. If you want to run a marathon, you have to be ready for that distance near the date of the marathon. It's no point starting your preparation week 1 by trying to run 20 miles. It's not going to work. You have to build up steadily in your preparation so you peak at the right time. Well, we do the same with CFA. Cognition will do the same for you. It'll set you deadlines and it'll hopefully build up some momentum along the way. But it's important that you are aware of this. Sometimes students go too fast. You know, they put in too much work early on and they actually find they start to get tired, get a bit disinterested, they kind of screaming out for their life back, in which case have a short break, have a weekend off, you know, be aware of what's happening. But we definitely recommend you try and pace yourself, try and increase your weekly study time, you know, so keep an awareness of how long you are studying, build up, maybe see how much time off you can get before the actual exam. Many candidates throughout the world take a few days, sometimes take a week off before the exam. I did, and I personally think it was vital, probably made the difference in my case between passing and not passing. So that last week is very important. But that said, do not overload the last week. Again, I know many candidates who just try and fit in far too much studying in that last week. At the end of the day, we're all human. And there's no point trying to study for 15, 20 hours a day for 5 days, because then when you come to the real exam, you'll be exhausted and you'll underperform. So work on your pace, build up, but be careful in that last week. You know, there's definitely a balance there between studying and keeping yourself fresh for the big day. The calculator, as I'm sure you know, there is a prescribed calculator. In fact, there's two. There's the Hewlett-Packard 12C, HP 12C, and the more common Texas Instruments BA2+. The Texas Instruments come in different versions. There's a professional version, there's a student version, but they're essentially the same, just that one looks a little bit nicer and it costs a bit more money, but they have the same functions. We recommend you go for the Texas one. It's cheaper, it is more intuitive. If you've never used the Hewlett-Packard, I probably wouldn't recommend you start now. The Hewlett-Packard uses a completely different type of entry. It's actually known as reverse Polish logic. And really, unless you've been brought up on that, maybe at university or business school, I wouldn't start now. Whereas a Texas Instruments is much more like a calculator that you would have seen elsewhere. So if you're doing a simple sum like 2 times 3, you would simply do 2 times 3 equals. Hewlett-Packard, you wouldn't do that. It's a completely different way of entering the buttons. I won't go through now, but it's totally different. So the Texas Instruments is the one we recommend. Also, within the Instruments, Texas Instruments calculator, there are some really useful functions. And these are effectively embedded worksheets. Think of it as having a whole series of Excel worksheets that someone has already put in the formulae, and all you have to do is to plug in the values and it gives you the answer. So we have net present value and IRR worksheets, which are very common, as an amortization worksheet. So if you want to amortize a bond or amortize any kind of liability, you can use that. Probably my favorite one is the iConvert interest rate conversion function. So if you want to switch between a flat rate and a compound rate, the iConvert function does that for you. But there's quite a few, and the key is you have to be all over the calculator. The exam is time pressured to a degree. You have 1.5 minutes per question. That time will soon go, and you really can't afford to waste time staring at your calculator thinking, which button do I press next? So it has to become second nature. I suggest you use this calculator as much as possible in your professional side. I know we tend to use Excel in our work, but if you can try and use the calculator as well, it will help you generate that speed for the exam. If you want some further help, there's a calculator guide you can find. The link is shown below. But basically, you have to be all over this calculator. Lack of support from fellow peers, an important kind of pitfall. It's very easy to get isolated, to think you're on your own, and you forget the fact that many other people are going through a very similar experience. I would urge you to have a study partner, work with someone. If nothing else, it helps to have someone else admit they find something difficult. I remember studying with a friend of mine. We actually studied together for all three levels. And I remember in particular at level 1 having real difficulty with one area. It was actually deferred tax. It still sends a shiver down my spine when I use those words. I used to hate that topic. I never really understood it as a candidate. And you know what really helped is when I spoke to my friend, very, very smart lady who's now gone on to be very successful, but I won't embarrass her with her name. But it was really nice to hear her say, you know what, Simon, I also find that hard. And that suddenly helps you move on. So having some kind of peer support is very useful. Now, for some of you, that you can do that through your work. For others, it's much harder, in which case then let us be your peer support. Let our full-time faculty help you. We're on hand. If you can email us or send a query through the help desk feature in Cognition, we can be that other side. We can be that person saying, don't worry, everyone finds this difficult. And it really does help you gain perspective. Otherwise, you can get stuck. You can keep on going until you get something. And if someone says, you know what, it's probably not worth it, let's move on, then it can really help you. So I think having a support from your peer group is very important. Also, something else that's slightly to the side of here is try and get support from your managers. As we know, it can be quite difficult at times to leave work at a sensible hour. But if you want to leave work at a sensible hour so you can study, then that's a different conversation. So I'd recommend, as part of this peer support, you include in this your managers. Talk with them, let them know you're doing CFA, and then hopefully they won't give you such a hard time when you leave the office at 7 and they're expecting to still be there until 10. But if they know you're going to study or going to an evening class, it can be easier. Cramming. Now, we did mention that for ethics, possibly cramming can work, and that's because it's a very narrative, descriptive aspect. But most of the curriculum, and this is true at all three levels, is not like that. A lot of it is highly conceptual, some of it is mathematical, and as you go through the three levels, you'll find the ability or the results from cramming diminish. And so cramming generally does not work. You'll find loads of urban myths out there of people who claim to have passed level 1 with 2 weeks studying. I find that quite hard to believe. I mean, there may be the odd person out there who's super intelligent, but I think for most people that simply isn't a possibility. So have a plan, and again, this is where Cognition will help you. It will set you dates which are sensible, and it will make you keep on track. I would not try and leave everything to the very end. There's simply too much to learn. And of course, with multiple choice format questions, you have to pick the right answer. You haven't got the luxury of writing an answer which allows for a little bit of variation. You have to pick the precise answer the examiner wants. And that means you have to go through the curriculum. So please avoid cramming. It goes back to my opening comments. Have a plan, have some structure. And of course, Cognition will absolutely provide you with that structure. Try not to memorize. Try and understand. Again, you'll find, although it may be initially harder to understand rather than memorize, you'll save time in the long run because the information will come back to you quicker when you start to review and get ready for the final exam. So try and avoid cramming. Try and spread your work evenly. Like one of the earlier pitfalls you mentioned about trying to have maybe 10 to 15 hours a week. That's much better, and if you spread it over the week, than trying to hit all of your study in one day. The exam day. Some people do everything we've spoken about. They've avoided every pitfall. They've had a plan. They've got their peer support. They've worked on their ethics. They know their calculator inside out. But you know what? The exam day gets to them. And it is a tough day. You will be nervous. I was. And so it helps to be aware of that. It helps to go into that exam hall thinking, you know what, everyone's in the same boat. Everyone else is going to feel nervous. Remind yourself that you do not have to get every question right. You will take a few hits. There'll be some questions you've got absolutely no idea. Certainly, I had a few of those, but you don't need to get 100%. Now, of course, the passing score is never, ever discussed by the CF Institute. All we know is that no one has ever failed this exam who scored 70% and above. So aim for 70%, you should be fine. So, okay, fine, that's 30% of the exam you can get wrong. So just keep it in perspective. Yeah. Now, how you deal with your day is different strategies. Personally, I used to be a fan of starting with my strongest topic. That helps settle the nerves. So for me, that was economics and quants. I would do those two first. And not only was I certain or more certain of getting those questions right, I also found myself I could do those questions quite quickly. And therefore it meant I could spend a bit more time on some of the harder topics. Right? Because let's face it, if you do run out of time, which most people, to be honest, don't, but there's a few who do, if you run out of time in exam, you should aim to run out of time on your hardest topic, on those areas that you might have got wrong. If you run out of time on one of your strongest topics, you're throwing away marks. So I personally would get my strongest topics out of the way first and then leave my weaker topics towards the end. The topics, as you probably know, are separated in the exam. So the questions aren't all mixed up. Literally say, okay, the next 15 questions will be on fixed income. So you can go straight to the fixed income section if you want to. A few other kind of obvious, I think, but still equally important aspects, and that is to plan your journey. Are you going to travel to the centre in your car, or are you going to use public transport? If you're using public transport, it seems obvious, I know, but check the journey. Make sure it's running. Remember, the exams tend to be at the weekends, and therefore make sure that the public transport is running at the weekend. But probably the most important thing, I would say, is towards the end of this slide, and that's to do with the exam rules and regulations. The CFA exam have exam rules, exam policy, as all exams do. But I must say I've never, ever had an exam which enforces these rules in such a stringent way. So I'd absolutely urge you to look at the exam centre rules and absolutely do not deviate one bit. So these rules are there, they're there for a reason, and you must follow them. One of them, for example, which catches a few people out, is to do with the exam ticket. As you get nearer to the exam, when you log into the CF Institute portal, you'll be able to print off your exam ticket. The exam ticket is a very important document. Without it, you can't get into the exam. Also, the exam ticket has to be pristine. If you've written over it, it will not be accepted. All right, so when you print off your exam ticket, go and find your passport. Again, do this before the exam. Check the passport is still valid. If your passport is expired, it will not be acceptable as a form of evidence. But you want to hopefully have your passport that's still valid. And then that can be evidence of who you are, your identity. Stick that with your exam ticket, keep it safe. Every year, and I've been doing this for many, many years, every year, unfortunately, we have one of our candidates who gets rejected from the actual exam despite all their work because their passport might have been out of date, or maybe they've written on an exam ticket and the proctor says, no, not happening. So please, please, please make sure you follow the rules. But otherwise, the exam is a pressurized experience, we said earlier. So just being aware of that can actually hopefully help ease that pressure. Last thing to add, which is on the slide, but it's an important one, is there's no negative marking. So if the worst comes to the worst, guess. You've got a 1 in 3 chance of getting it right. Well, hopefully those pitfalls will help you avoid some of the problems that we have seen over the years. If you want some courses to help you get through CFA, then Fitch Learning has a whole range of different courses. You will find there's slight variations depending on where you are in the world. So please, check the website for further details. But as a general overview, we have classes which some of them run during the working week, some run through evenings, some run daytime. We have classes which are stretched over a fairly long period of time, other classes which are much, much quicker paced, intensive classes. So there's lots of variety there for you to have. Every single class structure, however, comes with the online support, which is otherwise called Fitch Learning Cognition. So everyone will get that. There's also, by the way, an app that goes along with Cognition. The app is appropriate for Android and Apple. Right? So whichever course structure you go for, you will get this Cognition online product. Maybe you just want the online product. It's really up to you. Also, nearer the business end of the preparation, we have review courses. Again, you may find slight variations in the duration of those courses depending on where you are, but generally around about 2 days of review courses. And there's mock exams. Again, we have a proctored exam and then several other mock exams which will be available through your portal. So hopefully, as a little summary of what we can do to help you pass CFA. We've mentioned the online learning options and the online learning tool known as Cognition. And that really, I'd urge you to have a go at it. Use the demo link on this presentation. There's nothing like it out there. It's a fantastic product. The algorithm that tracks your progress is really very smart. And it's such an efficient way of covering the material. So rather than trying to answer every question, you don't need to waste time answering questions on a topic we've already scored well on, so it will save you that time and move you on. It's such an efficient program. I would urge you to have a look at it. As well as that, for those of you who come into our classrooms, we have very, very thorough slide packs, which will take you through the curriculum. Each slide pack is clearly referenced to the CFA curriculum. We offer mind maps, you mentioned. We offered revision or review courses, depending on which word you want to use. And I guess the most important thing is we offer you support. We're here to help you, whether that is support in terms of like a peer support, where we can simply say to you, yep, everyone finds that difficult, or whether the support is more of a technical nature. You want to ask a question, why is that? Or what's the definition of this? Or where do I find this in a curriculum? So our global CFA team will be on hand to help you. So here's a few summary points of Cognition, which we have mentioned earlier, and hopefully this rings a bell from our earlier discussions. So what did we mention? We mentioned this very, very clever questioning algorithms, this adaptive questioning. Very, very efficient way of identifying what you know and what you don't know and moving you onto the areas you don't know. The tool, the Cognition tool, along with the app, will also give you access to a whole range of other materials. So whether that is annotated slides from the instructor if you're having a class option, videos, you can access the entire library of videos if you want, or you can use the Cognition kind of pathway. So for every topic, we've broken it down to what we think is a logical order for mastering that topic. And we'll break down each recording into those bite-sized or atomized recordings. So you can either take our recommended pathway through the recordings, or you can simply watch it yourself. But you are in control of your learning in that respect there. And as I mentioned right at the very beginning, Cognition gives you a plan, gives you a structure. You can set dates, depending on when you're starting your studying. Okay, the end date will be the CFA exam, but Cognition then will work out deadlines, appropriate targets for you based on those dates. So there we are. Where to go next? Well, I think the first thing I would do if I was you is to have a look at Cognition. So I'm very, very proud of it. I think it's by far the best CFA preparation tool you'll find, and hopefully when you've had a look at it, you'll realize why. So have a look at the Cognition demo. Have a look at what some of our past delegates have said about us. And if you still like what you see, then hopefully you'll come on board with Fitch Learning, and we'll be more than happy to send you a link to offer you a small discount if that's the case. For any further details, just please contact your regional office. Thank you for listening.